Hi, and welcome to The Fault Line, a CMG Consulting podcast exploring the pivotal moments where business strategy meets real-world pressure. In every business, there's a point where strategy meets stress, where plans are tested and decisions define the outcome. The Fault Line, hosted by myself, Gary Lancina, and my colleague Kim Scribner, uncovers those moments through conversations with CMG experts and industry leaders. From pricing strategy to go-to-market transformation, leadership, and growth, each episode explores the unseen pressures and pivotal shifts that shape the business landscape. And here in our initial episode, I just want to welcome my co-host Kim Scribner and share that I'm super excited about this whole process. This has been a long time coming, and I'm looking forward to digging into a bunch of topics over the coming weeks and months with you. And I'm also just as excited by how our audience is going to get to know us and hopefully, if this all goes right, end up contributing themselves as we start to bring people in and really work on some of the topics ahead. So with that, I'll kick it over to you, Kim. I'm curious, how are you feeling here in episode 1?
Yeah, happy to be here, Gary. Great way to introduce our audience to the Fault Line. Like talking with you always about how we can uncover the cracks that exist in some organizations and help clients and others find ways to fill them and evolve to have deep impact and results in their organizations.
Yeah, and the name The Fault Line is something that we've kicked around. I try not to overcook things like the branding, but for me, this one really resonated because I think both in our professional experiences in various organizations and now in our position as advisors and consultants, we see over and over and over again how the hypothetical runs right into reality. And the bridge is really the attempt to overcome those points of friction and pressure to say, hey, the aspiration is good. We got to have a healthy dose of pragmatism here to make it real. And that's where the fault line is. So I'm not going to overplay the metaphor, but I am super excited by all the different areas where we can look at that conjunction of plan and execution and try to be, good stewards of helping people get better at bringing the plans to life in a way that feels both motivating and valuable.
I use the word pragmatic. To me, the word purposeful also makes a lot of sense, right? You don't want to change your organization for the sake of change. And so the Fault Line allows us to think about it in a way that's identify, assess, make a plan to resolve, measure your impact in resolving the issue, and then keep repeating that cycle over and over again, right? Knowing that some fault lines are bigger and deeper than others and might take longer to resolve. But those are the problems that we love to get into with our clients and honestly, even in the day-to-day of life, right? You're always a consultant. Your consulting is always on.
And for me, I love this idea of with a purpose, with intent, with a sense of mission. Sometimes that's very altruistic. Sometimes it's sort of self-preserving. But this idea of we're not just doing this, as you said, for the sake of doing it. We're doing it to actually get someplace better. And there's this thought in human-centered design or design thinking that every creation, every development of a solution is essentially a design exercise. And for me, it sort of brings with it this idea of to be better. And, the fault line, right? This gap for me is sort of the vacillation between a clear-eyed sense of reality. This is the situation we're in today, and sort of the potential of what could be better. And as we work through that, then starting to develop the plan and then the delivery of that plan, there's a nice little cycle there. But that cycle sort of feeds itself over the idea of reality and potential, and then sort of planning and execution. And that little sort of step-by-step approach feels like it sort of lays out both the the gap between what we intend and what we do, but also in this idea of current state to future state. There's another fault line there, or another opportunity there to sort of say, yes, we can. And to me, that's one of those veins where purpose really comes right to the surface and becomes a motivating factor, a rallying factor, whether it's for a pricing exercise or it's an organizational transformation.
And I think it's just the reality, right? That it's not we're not just building a clean bridge over the fault line, right? Because some are messier than others. You also, you don't want to ignore it and just go over or around it. And so what we're talking about are real problems that we, want to help people solve. I think the other part of, you talked about something a couple of seconds ago about motivation and like what excites us about being here. And I think we're both driven by the passion and desire to help people make things better, right? Just generally speaking, like make organizations more efficient, make organizations more effective. And this gives us a chance to talk about those things in a little bit more of a fun way maybe than we do on a day-to-day basis. And, hoping that people take little snippets away from this that they can apply in their real world.
Absolutely. And we're consultants. We write case studies. We write white papers. We generate playbooks. We create all these artifacts that are sort of guiding or directive for folks. And at the same time, I never want to lose sight of the fact that we're working with human beings, right? And at the center of all of this is the potential in human beings to work together to achieve, to do more, to do better, to do it faster. And, I know you well enough to know that you're wired similarly. We get excited. And I think this is also part of what drives us to do the work we do, by the optimism that we carry around with us. There's this little flame that, can be set to a good set of circumstances to generate heat, to generate this idea of light and forward motion. And that to me is the primary reason why I hopped out of, executive leadership inside corporations to do the more advisory and consultative work, is because I just love the power of a great team. It gets me excited. I can't tell you how many times, and when I reflect on my career or sort of team sports from my youth, right, the best sort of memories and the best experiences were the ones where, working together, we achieved something other people didn't think we could. And now I get to go try and help people do that on a recurring basis. It's so much fun.
That reflective moment, still have it to this day. Teams that I worked with 10, 15 years ago, what was the magic we had that made us do these great things, right? And you have a little bit of nostalgia around it. Probably wasn't as amazing then in the moment as you reflect upon it, because that hindsight moment, but you still can feel that energy. And I think that's part of what we're trying to do here, is bring that energy to something that can be like, you mentioned pricing strategy before. I mean, not a lot of people get excited about pricing strategy, but the outcome and the impact that a good pricing strategy can have is exciting, and it does impact humans.
Yeah. And, and this is probably a tease to a future episode where we talk about pricing, but that's the rubber hits the road moment. Is my value proposition worth your hard-earned dough? Are you willing to reach in your pocket and pay me for it? And how we approach that, and the sort of empathy and appreciation and insights about the people we serve, can indicate a lot about how we then have to create a set of pricing mechanisms and solutions that feel fair. And, I think a big part of where we're going with all of this is this idea of, whether it's pricing, whether it's organizational change, whether it's brand positioning, or it's leadership behaviors or strategy articulation. There's so many different topics that we touch on as a firm and as a practice, but they all come back to this idea of being clear on what we're trying to accomplish together and generating higher levels of trust. And that's a massive tease for some recurring themes that are going to come up as we go through these conversations, because where trust is limited or hasn't been established, the progress is just incredibly hard, right? And I'm curious if that elicits some sort of response from you, because for anybody who's not watching us on video, you got a smile on your face, so I know you're thinking things.
So a few things I'm thinking, and I'm always thinking. So the trust factor is important, right? You talked earlier about us being advisors, and I think there's a trust factor that comes in there when you work with us in a more professional sense. There's a trust factor that's happening even as we're recording this podcast, right? I am not in the same physical space as Gary. I'm many thousands of miles away from him. And I trust that we are going to have a unscripted conversation that provides value to our audience. So there's a lot of trust happening all around. I think we talked also about being focused on humans. And so if I could, a little plug for if you're listening to this or you're watching this and you have a topic you would love to hear us talk about and dive into, use any of our channels to let us know that. We want this to be organic as well. You know, some parts our thought leadership, but also some parts what the masses want to hear about and would love to hear us collaborate on.
And, maybe in terms of full disclosure and building on what you just talked about, as we look forward, we work for CMG Consulting. We are in the business of engineering growth for our clients. Sometimes that growth is personal growth and better leadership capabilities so that those leaders can work together and articulate strategy and direction for the rest of the enterprise. Sometimes that growth is very pragmatic. Hey, what insights do we have? How do we turn that into innovation? How do we bring that to market with value? Sometimes it's optimizing a portfolio of activities. The feedback loop between statements of intent through strategy and execution are going to play out. I think there's also a clear human-centric approach that we both bring that says all of this subject matter is interesting, but it's not automated. It's, no matter how good the AI gets, no matter how good the technologies are, at the end of the day, there are people who are involved in generating that momentum, delivering on the commitments, and actually optimizing the performance over time. Another theme that we're going to play on. And, as we look at some of the topics we have as placeholders, one is cracks in the culture and how trust can be a competitive advantage. Related to that is this idea of alignment, getting everybody who needs to be on the same page. The signals we miss. How do we understand when we're about to run headlong into a disruptive moment for our business or for our industry? And what can we do about that? And I think those are the types of things that will be infused with those sort of underlying pillars around trust and clarity and the potential in humans, but also become very, very relevant as specific subject matter areas or problems that the people who might be working with us want to solve. Because at the end of the day, we're trying to reach out to all those people who are like, you know what? Change can be beneficial. I've got this inkling that I could make a difference. And I think that's, for me, part of cultivating the audience and building this idea. And it's a primary motivator for the podcast is to tap into that sense of common purpose, because there's a ton of people out there who see themselves almost in isolated fashion. Like, it's lonely to say, I think we could do better and push against the orthodoxy inside your organization.
I'm laughing because I think there's also we're different, right? Every consultant has heard from a client, and we care for you all dearly. We're different. And so, hopefully part of what we can bring to light here is that, yes, we are all unique, but our problems are things that other organizations have run up against before.
Yes. We're all different in the same fashion, or we're all the same in our own unique ways. I love that idea. So is there anything, as you cast your mind forward and for this podcast, that you would say, you know what, if we do our jobs right, this is success for us, for you and me, Kim, in what we're up to?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it is from the audience's perspective, they hear something that opens up a new way to solve a problem for them. That's success for me. Like, I want folks to be listening and or watching and hear something that makes them have that aha moment that they can turn it into action inside their organization.
Yeah. For me, I love that idea of we've provided a little inspiration or instigation to think differently or try something different or even just engage in a conversation. Hey, I heard this thing, and it might be interesting. I think the other element for me that would be success is that over time, we're starting right now with just us. We have an audience of 0 outside of us right now, is that we start to see some followers. We start to build a sense of community and connection. And along with that, the ability to comment, the ability to contribute, the ability to collaborate. So if I cast my mind forward, a year from now, there are a bunch of people who say, hey, I get good stuff out of this recurring dialogue. And I'm able to throw my own perspective in and have it resonate in some way. Because I think we're both self-aware enough to know that we don't have all the answers. But together we can get closer to them and we can actually bring other people in, and some pretty special things could happen there. So this, episode 1 is all about optimism and potential for me.
Yeah, I think, Gary, for sure, the building community is something that I hope we can gather.
What I would say is this has been a fun start. I'm looking forward to the next one, which will be in the very near future. Our aspiration is, as best possible, to do this every week. We'll be back on a regular basis. And I would say thanks for listening to The Fault Line by CMG Consulting. For more insights, for more perspective, visit cmgconsulting.com or follow us on LinkedIn. We're always putting out commentary there and welcome everybody's participation.